Well, hello to my Sunday school friends. I hope you're doing well. The last few weeks, we've been talking about God's servant, the prophet Jeremiah. Remember last time Jeremiah wrote God's words in a book and they were read to the king. And instead of listening, the king took his knife and every time a few sentences or lines were read, he'd cut them out of the scroll with his knife and throw them in the fire until he burned the whole book. But Jeremiah continued to tell the people God's rules and God's laws and God's judgments, and this story picks up there. So the Chaldeans, people from Babylon, were again coming to make war on Judah. And Jeremiah walked around the people and he told them that the Chaldeans would win, that because of their sins, because they'd abandoned God, they were going to be defeated in by Babylon. And so some of the princes got so angry with Jeremiah that they had him thrown into the dungeon. But the enemy army came nearer and nearer. That didn't stop just because they'd thrown Jeremiah in the dungeon. The army came nearer and nearer. The city was in great danger, and the king, Zedekiah, was afraid. And secretly he sent for Jeremiah and he said, "Tell me, is there any new word of the Lord?" Now, Jeremiah had a decision to make, right? He could make something up, some happy talk that would please the king and get him out of jail, but that's not Jeremiah's style. Jeremiah was brave, and he told the king the truth, that there was trouble coming, even if it meant that he had to stay in the prison. But he said to the king, "You and your armies are going to be captured by the king of Babylon, but I'm confused, king, why I'm in prison. What have I ever done but tell the truth? What have I ever done but serve you? And where are those fake prophets of yours that told you for all those years, that the Chaldeans would never march against the city? They were wrong and I was right. Why am I in prison? Please don't send me back there or I will surely die." And the king listened carefully, and he didn't send Jeremiah back to prison. He sent him to live in the home of one of the guards where he got much better care. But Jeremiah now had a little bit of freedom, and what he did with his freedom? He went right back to telling the people what God was going to do and what was going to happen because of their sins. And some of the people got so angry that they took Jeremiah and they threw him down into an old well that had thick mud at the bottom, and they left him to starve to death. But he didn't die there, right? There was an old Ethiopian guy, Ebed-Melech, went to the king and said, "Hey, some losers and scoundrels have thrown Jeremiah down into the well and he's going to die there. That's not right." And the king agreed it wasn't right, and he sent 30 soldiers to pull Jeremiah up out of that well so that he wouldn't die there. Right? Jeremiah went back to the king and he told him, "Listen, this is going to be bad. The army that's coming is going to capture the city. They're going to break down the walls. They're going to destroy the beautiful temple." Right? But God won't let Nebuchadnezzar, the Chaldean king, kill all the people of Jerusalem if they just surrender. If they volunteer to be his servants, they don't need to starve to death inside the city. But Jeremiah, he wasn't sent back to prison or the guard's house. He was kept in the palace. He wasn't allowed to go and talk to any of the people. And the king and his leaders didn't want to give up, didn't want to surrender to Nebuchadnezzar. So they shut the gates and they stayed inside the city while Nebuchadnezzar and his armies stayed outside the city, and the people began to starve. And when all the food ran out, the king tried to sneak away. But he didn't get very far before he was captured. And once Nebuchadnezzar had the king, the surrender was easily effected. The gates were open. The people were taken away to Babylon. The walls were torn down. The temple was looted. The Babylonians took all the silver and the gold out of the temple, and then they burned the city. Everything Jeremiah said came true. Now, what happened to Jeremiah? Well, the Babylonians treated him kindly. They recognized that he was an honorable man and that he spoke for God, and so they gave him a choice. Do you want to come to Babylon with the captives and continue to serve them there, or do you want to stay here with the people who are too old and sick to be taken away as slaves? What do you want to do? And Jeremiah decided that he wanted to stay in Judah, in Jerusalem, with those who were too weak or too old to be carried away in slavery, and continue to tell them the word of the Lord. So that's what he did. And God told Jeremiah to write a book of hope to the captives in Babylon, a promise of God that God hadn't forgotten them, that their punishment wouldn't be forever, and that someday God would bring them home to their land and to their city. So that's what Jeremiah did. He felt great sorrow for the people. He was sometimes called the weeping prophet, but he was a faithful prophet of God. He wrote what God told him to write. He said what God told him to say, and he did it bravely, even if it got him into trouble. All right, so that's the story. Next week we'll pick up with something else. You take care of yourself. It is always wonderful to hear from you. Bye-bye.